in trying to address how these artworks work, how 60s politics works, for me it's been very helpful to use this theorist's work, Jacques Rancière, because for him there's a centrality to politics of perception. I think Rancière's been taken up within art history quite a bit recently, though I used some of his earlier stuff, a book called Disagreement. But anyway, we can talk about this. So he says, when you think about what politics is, political activity is always a mode of expression that undoes the perceptible divisions of the police order by implementing a basically heterogeneous assumption, that of a part of those who have no part, an assumption that at the end of the day itself demonstrates the sheer contingency of that order, the equality of any speaking being with any other speaking being. Okay, that's a dense quote. But the things I'd point to here is perceptible and heterogeneous. And he talks about police. For him, police is not the guys with the blue uniforms who hit you in the head periodically. It's a general category. I mean, it's like Foucault. It's a general category that sort of describes an intersection of the state and the social order, a kind of logic of the social that ascribes to and gives people places and social identities, and is kind of is both a process of recognizing people and it's kind of prescriptive. You're a student, okay? You've been defined as a student. Students do certain things. If you do things that aren't that, it's kind of hard to see it. This is a classic issue for the 60s. Well, artist works like that too, yeah. And for Rancière, it's about the control of the perceptible. What he says, what can or cannot be seen, dividing what can be heard from what cannot. I'm missing the end quote here. It's very much an issue of voice, to moving from sort of unseeable, non-existent categories to recognition, going from noise to voice. That's sort of the central thing in politics. When politics is really serious, when it involves really transforming society and social order. And when Rancière's writing about it, this concept of the police, I think, sort of slips between symbolic categories and also the practices by means of which those categories are defended, that is, policed. Okay. So for him, it's very much keyed into perception. If police refers chiefly to the perception of legitimate actors within a distributed order, then politics is the practice which disrupts this order with new configurations of the social and bringing new voices, new actors. And so events and eventfulness are an intimate part of this contestation over what's perceptible, and the emergence of political subjectification, which is a big word that simply means what does it take to get someone to feel that they need to do something politically, and how do you get from a quiet time to streets full of people marching and yelling and whatever, or doing anything. And relatedly, how do you go from artists doing little to engaged in careful tracing of the 1,000-yen note in a giant size to the point where they fall down with stomach convulsions periodically, and interrupting their money-making pursuits, and are on the verge of starvation. So I use that approach in this book quite a bit, and this was just a summary of the part that I sent you guys. This is the book title, by the way, which is a little bit better than the presentation title, Money, Trains, and Guillotines. Art and Revolution in 1960s Japan. And these are all three art events, and I guess I'll talk about all three of them today. So in the chapters, I talk about the political context, both right at the time that the artists are working, and also continuing legacies, especially from the occupation, which is where the Yomiuri Independent comes from, out of a kind of use of culture to cover up a kind of fraught political history. The central importance of everyday life, the artistic context in which these artists are moving away from kind of socialist realism in many cases, and cueing off of things like Informel and some of the performances that have come to Japan at that time period, and centered on the Yomiuri Independent, this kind of playful competitive art using junk, using really the debris of the economic expansion, and there's plenty of sort of increasingly crazy and provocative works, and it's done in a spirit of fun. But what I argue happens is that by working with these materials, artists come to develop a discourse about everyday life through this art. And I think it's way out in front politically for the time period. The Yomiuri Independent is a crucible. The word is Akasegawa Genpei's. And that too relates to the problem of collecting. I have to say, I've been to a lot of retrospective shows. The only one that I've seen that really I felt like had any sort of capturing of sort of what was going on was Dorian's, and that was the reconstruction of that incredible room-size installation by Kudo from the Yomiuri Independent, because you could step into that space and here was all the materials and but it's been something that artists have remarked on going to retrospective shows, that it's like this doesn't have the energy, this doesn't have, something's missing. We can talk about some of these issues. I do discuss in this section the discourse of energy and people trying to find the right words to explain what's happening, what's significant with this art, and where it came from and what's going on. Akasegawa basically argues that the real work at the time was the Yomiuri Independent as a space, as a performance, and a crucible that where you have molten stuff inside, and then you break it apart, and then it's something else, but it's sort of broken in the process. So, and what I argue is that what's happening is there's a kind of aesthetic and practical transformation that's happening that leads to a rethinking, some radical rethinking about who can act and what's going on, and that's politics. So for me, Rancière is not just an obligatory visit to French theory, but rather something that actually makes some sense and helps to grasp what's really going on here. Okay, so let's talk about some events or some non-events. I wanted to start with the guillotine from the title, which is written on in this thing called the Equipment Plan, and also this issue of art as direct action. Direct action, of course, being the anarchist and George Sorel idea of this final strike that will totally cause capitalism to fall apart or break the state or so on and so forth. Action, but you put direct in the front of it, and it really now something's happening. Now we have eventfulness.